Music is everywhere. It's in our cars and stores and video games. You probably are listening to music in the background of this video right now. It's something that has been with us for millennia, and nothing is going to change that. Music is the one unspoken language that we can all agree both mystifies us and also causes us to sometimes come together, whether it's talking about how great something is or how terrible it is. But just looking in the constructs of, say, heavy metal, have we actually gotten too much music? Are we getting treated to way too much that now it feels like it's a bit bogged down? Have we gone past the tangible limit where we could actually be surprised by what musicians within the genre are able to deliver to us? Let's talk and examine that a little bit today. Now, tangibly, what that is meant to represent is that you're able to achieve it within a certain period of time. Like, for example, if I were to take every single heavy metal release that came out in the year 2006 and listen to it back to back to back to back to back, realistically, I would be able to complete that without, dying, unless, of course, I have a heart attack or something like that. It's realistic to be done over the course of my lifetime. A great example of this was within video games, where the Mexican Runner, a Twitch streamer, completed all 714 officially Nintendo licensed NES games. It took him 2.5, nearly 3 years, but he was able to accomplish the feat. But over the course of music itself, no matter what genre you tend to look at, this is something that is absolutely cluttered to the core, to the gill. If you wanted to listen to each and every single album that have ever been released by these bands of just one genre, you couldn't do it. Hell, you couldn't do it after 5 or 6 different lifetimes. The wealth of music that is out there has just absolutely gone crazy. And what's been even crazier about it is that it's exploded in a time where physical media is no longer the method of choice for receiving this music for most people. It's interesting that at a time where there are more bands and more music than perhaps ever before, CD stores or music stores in general are closing left and right. That's the power that the internet has had. Not to mention, the internet is part of the reason why this exists. If you take a look at the metal archives, for example, they currently have logged more than 130,000 heavy metal bands over the span of 5 decades. This is amazing, but is not even a reflection of all of the metal bands that are out there. Because there are those that the Metal Archives just refuses to place on their site. Sure, these may only number in a couple of hundred or something like that, but that's still numbers that are there, discographies that exist. Then there are those that are just considered fringe line, either that or are they really metal? The ones that are typically either on the radio or just don't seem like they have that heavy extreme metal edge. Rule them out. Then you have underground music that's still just getting its feet wet, that hasn't yet gained the attraction of somebody to make an article on the Metal Archives for it or submit that in order to place them in the database. What about all the groups that are still distributing the old-fashioned way without using the internet in general? Sure, it's professional suicide, but it happens. Heavy metal is everywhere. There's a ton of it. And honestly, the one thing that I noticed in 2019, and really a couple of years before it, is that there's a shitload of parody that exists. And as a result, that's what causes the really good albums, the albums that tend to make Album of the Year lists or set your soul on fire, that's what makes those feel all the better to listen to. But digging through all of this in order to try to get to it is just insane. It is absolutely absurd. And within the past 20 years, with the advent of Bandcamp and with the advent of great tools that have now made making music a little bit easier for the common individual, you no longer need to have a record contract in order to have, a voice that could be heard. You no longer have to tape trade and hope that your 10 friends will eventually make a friend that is like, the mail clerk for Virgin Records and passes it on to one of their blokes. It's no longer like that. Now, there's the potential, or at least that's what's being sold to folks, there's the potential that you could be discovered at absolutely any point in time. And the only way that that's going to happen, however, is if you're able to put your music up and get your voice heard and get yourself a crowd. We've seen on Bandcamp that various heavy metal bands use this as a tool to further promote themselves. It gives them another option or another place where their music can be consumed. But there's so much music that exists out there that whenever you go through some of these different subgenres or some of these different tags, you have to sift through a lot of things in order to get to the thing that you really want. If you were to go and listen to everything from one page of a search that you did for, say, black metal or death metal or whatever it may be, how many of those do you feel that you would actually be attached enough to where you would want to follow them, where you would want to maybe purchase that album, or where you would actually want to see how their career goes? Trust me, I've done some of this for the 5 Reasons series. The number is not that large. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of bands out there that do tend to do the same things. And unfortunately, that is one of the true components of overcrowding, where similar things have been done by bands over and over again, but now it's become a little bit more noticeable. If you remember whenever death metal first was making a splash in the late 80s and the early 1990s, the shock factor, the awe factor, was something that really created this buzz among the metal community at that point. Really, whenever death metal first started to hit its stride, along with extreme metal over in the UK and here in America and in the rest of the world, it was because it was the alternative to, say, thrash metal, either that or the new wave of British heavy metal. Though inspired by those sounds, they were able to take things further and add different elements, whether it be punk or whether it be the occult, in order to create something that was brand new. And as a result, the explosion caused some of death metal's foremost records in order to get some of the highest totals that you probably wouldn't have expected for sales whenever you consider bands such as Obituary, Morbid Angel, and even Death. Cannibal Corpse still is able to boast pretty decent sales totals to this very day. They are considered one of the most important bands of death metal. However, if you take a look at the past 10 to 15 years, those numbers, while decent, have slumped off a little bit. And we haven't really had too many bands that have painted themselves as true surprises and broken out and become what some people would say the next big arena band, the next Metallica. The closest thing that we've really had has been perhaps Ghost. And that's incredible to believe by itself, considering there are a lot of folks that say that Ghost isn't even a heavy metal band. That's a debate for another day, for another time, and will probably happen until the end of time or until Ghost retire. But wow, the amount of music that's out there is absolutely staggering. You can find 17 bands on 3 pages on Bandcamp that sound almost exactly alike. Either that, or they sound exactly alike to something else that you've noticed or something else that you know, where they obviously have taken inspiration from this and they're putting their own spin on it. In some cases, they're young and they're just starting to get their feet wet. They're starting to build their own sound. In other cases, there's a lot of parody because that's what they like or that's what they want. That's the sound that they're going for. By no means am I saying that any of these bands should stop what they're doing and stop their dream. But at the same time, there has to be recognition that with so many cooks in the kitchen, with so many bands doing so many of the same things, there's only going to be certain ones that are going to be able to rise through the cracks and truly be seen as universally not accepted, but universally loved by members of that subgenre. This is something that's going to happen also with other species and styles of music. The reason why we only see the same couple of pop stars all the time is because that's what's been deemed acceptable. Those that have regional crowds or that have a great voice that seems to attract a small populace of fans never breaks through because they aren't seen as the ones that have the hit song. Either that, or in the case of some, they've been writing the hit songs for the others. Take a look at the case of Sia, if you ever have the opportunity to understand somebody who started as a songwriter and then her herself was able to take off and become a big star. But the same thing is also true with rock music. If you remember the 1990s and all of the different rock bands that seemed to be able to forge a career for themselves, the Bushes, the Foo Fighters, Nirvanas, and all of that in the world, think of all those bands that didn't quite make it, but still have a lot of things to offer. A band such as Luna with an album such as, I don't know, Pup Tent, it currently comes to mind. Really creative bands, really creative acts that are, at their core, independent during these time frames. They didn't exactly have the major backing of some of the other artists at the time. I'm also thinking of bands such as Supergrass, and they just didn't quite get the same leisure or the same help that some of these other bands were able to accomplish. But music fans still consume this stuff. They check it out. They want to know about it. They want to know what's up. So every genre has a lot of overcrowding. Every genre has a lot of bands that want to come in and be part of the act. But have we reached a saturation point? Has this DIY anybody can do it idea from the past 20 years actually caused music to balloon so greatly that it's about ready to pop? That nothing's going to truly feel all of that special anymore? Are we instead going to be left with 130,000 heavy metal bands that all feel like they are pretty damn good, but they're always going to have just a relatively small fan base? Is it all going to be just relegated to a small section of heavy metal fans, as opposed to us having a couple that are able to break out and become the big bands of this generation? Do we have any big bands of this generation outside of a Ghost, or outside of Five Finger Death Punch, or a Mon Amarth, or In Flames? Are In Flames even considered all of that big anymore? Notice what exactly is going on with this. With so many bands being out there, this also means that there are more people that want to have you listen to their product. Hell, if every person that comments on this video has a band and places it in the comments box below, I can guarantee you that there's going to be at least 100+ groups in those comments. Unless, of course, we get fewer than 100 comments, but that's not really the point. The point is that so many people want to express themselves creatively, express themselves musically. They want to be a part of this. They want to share their message with the world. But they also have rock and roll or heavy metal dreams that may be, at this stage of the game, just a little bit unrealistic. Doing it for the music and loving it for the music, that's different. That's something that's understandable. That should be your expectation going in. Your expectation should be always to do it for the love, not for the attempt at a fame. Fame could come, but it's about a 0.001% chance that it will. But oversaturation is definitely here. But you know, as a music fan, despite the fact that I just ranted and raved about how this is kind of hard, being a reviewer trying to satisfy everybody, I've satisfied maybe just that same 0.001% of people, with reviews that I've done for bands that they've recommended. That's how much is out there. And that's not even including all the stuff from the past. Whenever you bring the past into this, the number of artists that we have seen throughout our lifetimes, our parents, our grandparents' lifetimes, hell, those that have existed ever since music itself first began, being beaten on a rock by a bone by a caveman, has no doubt has to be well within the millions of different artists, whether that be just individual instrumentalists or bands, groups, singers, whatever. But despite all of that, I love it. I love the fact that it's somewhat saturated. I love the fact that I do have to somewhat, trudge through things in order to find that special album. Mostly because whenever I do find that special album, whenever I find that album of the year, style, quality, release, man, does it feel good. And man, does it hit me in a different way. The one that's able to hit me in that emotional center. The one that's able to take me to that brand new place. The one that's able to make my mouth actually go agape and experience that eargasm that we talked about back in 2011, all of those years ago. Those are the truly special ones that belong on the lists that are provided, at least to me. But that doesn't mean that you will have that same opinion. That's the coolest part about it. All of this saturation also means that opinions are going to be vastly different, which is the reason why, as heavy metal fans, we need to come together and understand that that's going to be true. They are going to be vastly different. So instead of being very combative about people's tastes, we should instead come together and instead maybe crossbreed our tastes a little bit, because you never know. You might find something that you really like, but then again, it could also be just like those 17 bands doing the same thing. It could be something that you've heard 1,001 times before. Tell me what bands that you have or that you know in the comments box below. Do you think that music is oversaturated? Or do you think that this is just a first world problem that we sometimes think about whenever we haven't heard anything that has really set our soul on fire that's been brand new for a couple of weeks? Is this something that just comes with the addiction of being an audiophile? Or is this something where we constantly need to be engaged with something that sounds like it's forward thinking? Let me know. I'm CoverKillerNation. I'll see you later.